What happened when people who suffer oppression becomes the ones in power? This is not just about a question. This is Liberia's reality. Now, you see very well, I talk about it. I talk in my first episode. We talk about the pain before Liberia, and the slavery trade, the slave trade, the return of the free Black American to Africa. But today, we are going deeper. Because arrival is not the same as belonging. And in 1822, a ship arrives on the West African coast. On that ship are free Black Americans. Some were born into slavery, some were free later in life, some had never seen Africa before. But now, they are here on the African soil, standing on a land that is supposed to be home. But here's the truth many people don't talk about. For them, this was not really home. They never considered it to be home. And for the people already living there, these newcomers were not family. Because long before 1822, this land already belonged to others. It belonged to the Pele, the Paso, the Loma, the Kio, the Madingo, the Mano, the Va, and the rest of the tribes. This community had their own systems, their own land, and their own identity. So when settlers arrived, this was not a reunion, this was an encounter. At first, there was an attempt to settle. Land was acquired, sometimes through agreement, sometimes through oppression, and sometimes through force. Conflict happened between the American Liberian and the native. Fight broke out. People died. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not be hiding things what happened during those days. The foundation of Liberia was not peaceful. It was chaos. It was war. It was indigenous against settlers. It was Black Africans against Africans. Same color, same thing. And then something even more important happened. The settler began to build. They built Morovia. They built churches. They built schools. They built governments. And in 1847, Liberia became an independent republic. Africa's first republic. A Black republic. A system of freedom. But freedom for who? For who? Who the freedom was for? Because while the settlers were building a nation, they were also building a system that looked very familiar with the American system. They dressed like Americans, they governed like Americans, they talked like Americans, and most importantly, they separated themselves from the native population. And this is where the real problem begins. This is where the real misunderstanding of freedom began. This is where the indigenous suffering begins. Instead of integrating, instead of saying we are one people, they created a hierarchy. At the top is Americo-Liberians. At the bottom is indigenous Liberians. Imagine people who were on the land before the coming of the American-Liberian and be considered as a second class on their own land. Even though both groups were black, they were treated differently. The settler control of political power, no native political attain at all. Education, the settler control education. If your name is not a modern name, or if you have indigenous name or a native name, you cannot enroll in a university or in high school. You consider to be a second class. Land ownership. While they were collecting tax from the indigenous, the American Liberians were living a first-class life, the best era of Liberia. Economic opportunity. The American Liberians were the one that owns the economy. They are the head of the very top universities. They are the richest people. They create a class system where when a certain group of people can own this particular position. That happened to the indigenous in Liberia, so-called the native. They were often excluded from most of the opportunity. They were taxed, but they had a little political voice. They were expected to follow, not to lead, because they said that the indigenous or the native people had a low IQ. Imagine that. Imagine you are living on your own land, but you do not control it. You are part of the community, but you don't belong to the system. This is not just inequality. This is something deeper. This is what a scholar calls internal colonialism. And what is internal colonialism is, it is when one group dominates another group within the same country. No foreign flag, no foreign intervention, no European ruler, but the same structure of control. Liberia was never colonized by Europe, but it experienced the colonial behavior from within. And here's the hardest truth to accept. Where people who had once been oppressed themselves. What happened? How did victims become a ruler? How did people who suffer injustice create a system that produced more injustice? This answer is complex, because when the settlers came, they did not just bring themselves. They brought American values, a Western education, a Christianity, a belief in civilization, and in that mindset, they saw themselves as more advanced than the native. They saw themselves as a higher IQ than the natives. So, instead of uniting, there was a distance. Instead of partnership, there was control. So over time, this division became normal. It became the system. It became the structure of Liberia. And when something becomes normal, people stop questioning it. But the native never forgot. They never forgot the exclusion. They never forgot the lack of opportunity. They never forgot the power was not shared. And this is how a silent frustration begins. Not loud, not violence, but deep, growing over time. This is where we connect communications and power, because control is not just about force, it's about the perception. If you control education, you control what people believe. If you control government, you control what people accept. If you control the system, you control what becomes normal. As for a long time, this system worked, but no system of inequality lasts forever, because one day the people at the bottom begin to ask question. Why not us? Why are we excluded? Why is this not our country too? And when those questions are not answered, they turn into something else. Anger. Liberia was built as a land of freedom, but from the very beginning, freedom was not equal. And when freedom is not shared, it does not stay peaceful. Because what started as a rival was slowly becoming a division. So I stop the episode right here. So look up to episode 3